Okay, so this is the Podcasting 101 panel. So if you're in here, you're either doing podcasting or you want to do podcasting. So let me start out by just asking you guys, how many of you are doing podcasting right now? Wow, look at that. That's half the people. And the rest of you, you're not doing it. Why? Because you don't know how, or you want... Give me a reason. Why aren't you doing it?
Well, I think I'm doing it. I don't know. I wanted to show up on iTunes and like integrate it with my YouTube.
We're going to get to that. But let me just tell you, if you think you're doing it, you'll know when you're doing it. and these folks will tell you how. So I'm Lisa Picarille, and I'm a consultant. You can find me at lisapicarille.com. And we've got a great panel of folks here, and let's start down at the end. We'll have them each give a brief introduction about who they are, and then we'll get into the presentation. So we have Trisha Lynn Fauver, who's with For Me to Coupon, down at the end, and take it away, Trisha.
Hi. Sorry, my throat's a little scratchy. Yeah, I'm with For Me to Coupon. We have an online coupon data feed of just coupons. And I co-host Affiliate Marketing Fanatics with Mike Buchel, who's in the house.
Who's over there?
And we do our podcast probably bi-weekly, that's the average.
Right. And next we have Daniel Clark, and Daniel co-hosts Geek Dads Weekly, and he's going to talk to you about what else he does.
Yeah, my name is Daniel M. Clark, and I co-host Geek Dads Weekly, as Lisa said, with this guy and that guy, Drew Bennett. We record weekly Sunday nights, sometimes Wednesday afternoons, but mostly Sunday nights now. And I also started a little video thing called Daniel Destroys, where I take an episode of the old Super Friends cartoon and I dissect it and make fun of it mercilessly.
Mercilessly?
Mercilessly?
He speaks for a living. I'm a podcaster. I am, really.
We're just using the keyboard.
Yeah. All right.
And then we have Joe Magennis. And Joe, why don't you tell us, besides Geek Dad Weekly, what you do?
I am a partner at a marketing agency called Fluid Media, based out of Atlanta. I'm currently on 3 podcasts, Geek Dads Weekly, as you've heard. I do a social media podcast with the CEO of Bella Web Design, also in Atlanta. And then I'm also doing a series for Baseballisms called Cover the Bases, where we interview authors of baseball books.
And just so you know, it says up there, I host the affiliate thing, and that's with Sean Collins. And we've been doing that for 3.5 years, and we do it every week. And we do it at 7 a.m. West Coast time on Monday morning. So it's the highlight of, starts off my week great. And I'm on a whole bunch of other podcasts. So I love podcasting, and I hope all you guys do too. So now we're going to talk about why you should podcast, and there are lots of reasons. So why don't we let you guys take it away, and Trisha, give us a good reason for podcasting.
It's really good for branding and getting yourself out there. People will recognize who you are and what you do more when you podcast, because if they're interested in your content, they're going to tune in, and by default, they're going to know who you are, because it's really hard not to talk about yourself, especially when you have to cover half hour, however long you decide to have your shows run. So it's really good for branding and just getting yourself out there so that people know, hey, that's Trisha, that's Mike, that's Daniel, that's Joe.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, because this is the first time that I've met the folks on the panel in person, but I've come to actually sort of know them. I think it's just kind of human nature, where you hear somebody's voice, you start to assign characteristics to them, and you say, oh, this person's trustworthy. This person, you kind of put a little, more stock into them, and they get credibility because you hear what they're saying on a weekly basis. So.
Joe and I have done more than 60 episodes of Geek Dads together, and this is in about 19 months or so, and this is the first time I've ever met him in person. So
half hour, 20 minutes ago.
Yeah, 20 minutes ago, first time we ever met. So.
And you're also, the brand building, you're doing a little bit with your voice as well. I just ran into Drew in the front row, and I was talking to somebody else, and he recognized me from my voice. And I think people feel a little bit of intimacy with you because you're not just putting out text content to them, and it feels a little bit more personal. Now, can you guys address the content portability issue a little bit? Who wants to take that?
Well, I think the podcast is all about just content development. And if you really kind of just want to be clinical about it, it's just another form of inventory that you might have to put your brand message out there. So you got blog posts, you got YouTube videos, you got all different ways of getting content developed, and podcasting is just another way to do that. The content portability aspect of it, though, is because you're not going to have an audience all the time sitting in front of their computer trying to consume that content that you're developing. So what you're doing with a podcast is you're giving them a chance to actually take the content and put it into a place where they're going to be using it, like the gym or going for a walk or something like that. So you're still actually able to deliver a message, but it's on their terms, and they're able to take that content and put it into a place where they can consume it at their leisure.
And the ultimate portability, of course, is that you may not always have an internet connection where you are. Even if you have a phone or an iPad or a similar device, you might not be online. Podcasts you download beforehand. You typically don't stream them through iTunes. You download them first. So you can take them someplace where you don't have connectivity. It's the ultimate in portability.
I think it also helps increase how people feel about you, because I know I'm a big magazine junkie, and one thing that I do is I have certain magazines that I read at certain times in certain places, and I look forward to it, like, you know, I'm gonna lay on the couch and read my new Elle, and, you know, or whatever magazine it may be. And I know there are people who do the same with podcasts, like, I'm gonna take this on a plane with me, or I listen to this every week when I go to the gym. And it actually, they look forward to it, and it makes their experience better, and it makes them think more fondly of you and of your brand as well.
I would listen to This Week in Tech while I was grocery shopping, you know, every week. I'd go grocery shopping on Mondays, and I'd listen to the previous days This Week in Tech when I was doing that. So it's definitely a not an aid to memory. That's not what I mean, but you know, it's a familiarity that you have with the show.
Now, there are a lot of reasons that people will tell us that they don't want a podcast, so we want to address some of the hurdles that you may face and talk about how easy they are to overcome. So I know that, you know, while you can probably tell that I have no problem talking and listening to the sound of my own voice all the time.
You've been doing it longer than any of us.
You know what? And I used to be in radio, so I mean, I think that's a thing that you get used to, hearing your own voice. And you know, you also can't be that judgmental about yourself. You're not going to say every sentence perfectly, and you're not going to do these things. But Tricia, why don't you talk a little bit about the apprehension, maybe?
I can't even tell you how long it took me to start a podcast, or to even get in on it, because I was so self-conscious about the tone of my voice, if it was too low or if it sounded funny, or you know, things like that. And the first, you know, few shows we did that I edited out every like where we would stutter trying to come to a thought, and I edited all that out because I was so self-conscious of it, and now I just don't care.
You'll learn quick that you just don't bother.
Right, and you know, it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, your first couple of shows are not going to, you know, you're not going to win a prize, but once you get used to it, you actually, you know, you kind of get into show mode, as, you know, most performers do. So you get into that mode where you're going to record. You may naturally not say as much because you know you're recording. And that gets better with time, that you are more conscious of how you're speaking. So you're not tripping over your words, or you're not searching for, you know, a thought. And it's really, there are worse things out there to listen to. I mean, have you heard Lady Gaga? There are worse things to listen to, so don't worry about if you don't think your voice is good, or if you don't think you have something to say. If you have an idea for a podcast, you have something to say.
You know, I wrote in Feedfront, the one that you got in your bag for Summit here, that you're not Tom Brokaw or Oprah, and people don't expect you to be. Your voice is fine. You might trip over your words a little bit, you might say and ah, but it doesn't matter. If you've got something to say and you can be engaging, that's what counts. So, and that's a learned thing. You know?
Yeah, and I mean, how many times do you interact with people in a face-to-face basis and think to yourself as they're explaining something to you about what they do for their business or another concept, like, wow, that delivery was really poor, or that guy said a lot, or he
Right.
could have explained that more succinctly. I mean, you don't do that in person with people, and so I think you don't do it when you listen to people talk on a podcast either. So being natural is just sort of the best way, I think, to go.
It goes back to what we were saying right at the very beginning, is you're building a reputation and you're getting some credibility built up by doing this podcast, and you're going to find an audience, and that audience will associate to you and relate to you based upon being natural. So, don't try to edit out all of that kind of stuff. You just got to be who you are, really.
No, I do the recording for our show, and there are very, very few edits that I ever make these days. It started out in the beginning where I would edit out a little more of the ums and ahs and things like that, but now, unless it's something really major where the show just screeches to a halt, or we have technical difficulties like we always do, it seems, toward the end of the show, but
Cylon.
when we Cylon, the microphone starts getting, I'll edit that out, but aside from that, I don't bother.
So
'Cause why?
while we're talking about that, it seems that maybe we should get to this part where it says concerns about what kind of persona to take on. I mean, do you feel like there are people out there that need to represent themselves differently?
Absolutely.
I mean, and how would they go about taking on another persona or determining whether they should?
Well, if you look at a lot of celebrities, I guess maybe the best example might be Howard Stern, who proclaims himself to be, very reserved in private, but very wild in public, where that's a persona that he takes on. I don't know how much truth there is to that because I don't know the guy, but there is something to be said for taking on a persona, as long as you can be consistent, because if you can't keep it up, then it's going to break down and people are just going to get turned off. So if you're not going to be natural, if you're not going to be yourself on your show, you got to choose something that you can stick with.
So I don't think anybody's saying like you should be fake or assume
No.
all these characteristics, but I think we all have different personas,
Yes.
even in our regular life. Like, when we're all here, we're being professional and we're being courteous and we're,
Right.
trying to present ourselves as best as we can. And maybe later in the evening at a club, we're presenting ourselves a little
Right.
differently. And you want to make sure that, you're sort of presenting the best parts about yourself, but
Right.
not being fake.
Right. It's about really, I think, examining the audience and choosing a persona that's based on you and going a little bit further to maybe engage the audience a little bit better. So it might be, if you are a naturally flamboyant person, perhaps, you might be even more flamboyant on your show. Or if you're very witty or funny, you might try to go that extra step to be a little wittier, a little funnier on your show and make that your public persona,
Right, and if you think that there's a lot of people who are shy, and that's one of their apprehensions, to go back briefly, is that they're very shy and they don't really feel comfortable talking into a microphone or talking into a headset, and knowing that people are going to hear that might be it might help you to kind of take on this just not so much a persona but more a mindset of, I can do this, I'm super confident on the air, but if I talk to you in person, maybe you're not so much, maybe you're more quiet and reserved. And that's, that could help you to get started. And again, like I said before, your first few shows, you're not going to win a prize. So if that helps you to get started, and then you drift more toward yourself and you get more comfortable, that's fine. Your listeners are going to appreciate your authenticity. They're not going to, be like, hey, what happened to Super Funny Bob? And where's this just knowledgeable, where's knowledgeable Bob coming from? They're not going to care.
So what about people who are worried that they don't have something to speak about? I mean, how would you tell them
Everybody
to
has
look
something
at
to
their
speak
business or their passions or whatever and decide what they can podcast about?
That's one of the hardest things about doing a podcast, is what's the topic going to be, and what are we going to talk about, on a consistent basis, on a weekly basis, And some shows kind of can lend themselves to just kind of be in a free flow conversation where there really isn't a whole lot of structure to it, and that's what Geek Dads Weekly is mostly like. We'll have a general sense of maybe what we're going to talk about, but it kind of lets the conversation happen, and where it goes is where it goes.
Our typical show is I call him up on Skype and say, what you got? what are we going to talk about, you know? And that's 5 minutes before we start recording.
It
So.
sounds like our show.
Yeah.
But then the other side of the spectrum is like the Cover the Bases series is an interview with an author, you know, so there's a lot of preparation that goes into that, and I'm having to, you know, read the book or at least get some of the information about the book, and so that I can ask questions and be prepared in advance of the podcast. But in terms of just this topic conversation, where this came from, and an easy thing to do if you're just starting out and trying to figure out where the podcast is going to go, is bring on guests to interview, you know, actually take on that role of, you know what, I'm going to find somebody that is in my niche or might be close to my niche that my audience might be interested in hearing from, and that's the simplest way to get going in terms of some content. And Affiliate Fanatics, you guys just did a great series of all the speakers that are coming, you know, that are here, and it's a great way to get tons of content is to just do an interview session. I actually used Harrow, the help a reporter out, to get the ball rolling with that. You know, I just put in there right at the very beginning saying I'm looking for authors, baseball books, and got tons of feedback back from there, and it's just been rolling ever since. You know, so think about just an interview topic as a way to get going with this content.
And people love to be guests on these kinds of things, and you would be
Absolutely.
surprised at the level of people that you can ask that want to participate because they believe that they're getting some additional reach and additional publicity for themselves, and so you can really get some good people to come on.
And it's fun. I mean, let's not forget, it's a lot of fun, you know? So getting a guest is usually it's a little more than, hey, do you want to be on the show? It's a lot of fun. They go, yeah. You know, it's like, all right.
Yeah, the hardest
Cool.
part of getting a guest sometimes is just scheduling.
It's scheduling, yeah.
Because, I don't think we've ever asked somebody to be on our show where they said no. I think the only times we've ever asked somebody to be on the show and they haven't been is because scheduling didn't work out. So,
So I want to get to quickly about the time requirements so that we can move into costs, which I think is really important.
Yeah.
But I just want to say that for me, you know, if you just carve out a specific time, I have a couple of podcasts I do, and on one of them, we sort of had a group of people, and it was never at a consistent time, and it was sort of, when can we get together? How can we do this? And that it never really went anywhere. So now I know that I've built it into my schedule every week at a certain time. And I think that once, you know, it's kind of like at work where I used to work somewhere where they gave you pizza every Thursday night when we were on deadline late when I worked at this newspaper. And then when they took the pizza away, it was bad. You know, I mean, you build up an expectation for people, and, you know, you need to deliver on that. If you tell people you're going to put the show out every Tuesday, you should put the show out every Tuesday. And if you can't commit to that, maybe you should do it once a month. But how important do you think, Tricia, consistency is?
it's very important because if you lack on your consistency, somebody else might jump in. And, but I mean, it is that kind of thing though, like Lisa was saying, if you realize, if you try to do it once a month, or I'm sorry, once a week, and you realize, there's just not enough to talk about once a week, then don't feel, bad to tell your listeners, hey, we're gonna, do once every other week, for a while, or, but as long as you set that expectation with your listeners and just, keep them along for the ride. So tell them, hey, we're going to do this once a month. Our schedules are crazy. Or,
Right.
People understand. There's a podcast I listen to that's, I don't know why I even listen because they're just having conversations about dumb things, but they're funny people. And, they've gone a couple of weeks without, they did a daily podcast and they've gone a couple of weeks now without having a new one. But they told their listeners, hey, our schedules, our work schedules are crazy in these next 2 weeks, so we're not going to have regular episodes, we're going to put up best ofs. So, if you tell your listeners, they'll forgive you, but if you, do it every week and then stop and then do it, if you're spotty and inconsistent, then people are going to forget about you.
Yeah.
That actually reminded me of something too before we move on, and especially for the people that are just thinking about doing a podcast and trying to decide if it's right for them, is that don't think that you're going to have the perfect podcast right out of the gate. The format might change, as you get kind of some feedback back from the audience, and the amount of times per week, it might change, whatever it is.
The length of the show might change.
Yeah, so just start doing it. And then as you get going, just work with the feedback from the audience and then help them, let them help you mold what that podcast is going to be all about. And it might change, the topic might change completely based on what you find from what they're telling you.
So
Yeah.
let's get into talking about how much money and the cost involved in getting going, because I think that sometimes when you
It's a ton. I'm sorry, you guys.
yeah, I mean, I think sometimes when you listen to these things, because technology has evolved, it sounds professional, and you think, wow, these people must have microphones and all in a studio and all kinds of things, and that's just really not true. The cost is not prohibitive to get started. So why don't we talk about what the cost is to get involved?
Okay.
If the studio is my dining room, then sure.
I've always said that all you need is a computer and a microphone. That's really all it comes down to. If you've got $20 to spend on a microphone, unless you've got a laptop, in which case you've got a microphone built right into your laptop, so you don't even need that, really. I mean, to get going.
Yeah, I've already got the slide up of some of the things you need,
Yeah.
so maybe we can start talking
Okay.
about what you need to get going.
Right. All the software you need can be found on your computer already, whether you're on a PC or a Mac. But I did list some alternatives. Personally, I use Audio Hijack Pro on my Mac because it makes things a lot easier. Basically, if something has a price up there, it just makes things easier.
Yeah.
It's not required.
Yeah,
So,
we use Pamela. I have a PC, and we use Pamela to record because it's compatible with Skype. And my co-host Mike is in New York, and I'm in California, so we don't sit together in a studio with cans on and record our show.
Right.
And you could probably figure that out from the quality. But Pamela is built into Skype, so it just works seamlessly for us. I mean, it's another little window, but it's it tells you when it's recording, so you're actually recording, and it's great, and it's only $40. And considering that in this whole endeavor of podcasting, that's all I paid for because I already had a headset. That's not bad.
Pamela, actually, you can get a free version of Pamela, but it's just a time limitation on it. So
That's
that's
right.
the only reason to pay
Right.
for it is so that you don't get cut off halfway through the conversation.
Yeah.
But,
What's the? Do you know the?
It's 30 minutes.
30 minutes. So if you do a 20-minute show, you don't even need to pay for
Yeah.
Pamela.
yeah.
Just make sure you don't go 31 minutes.
And as far as the headset goes, I mean, I have bought really, really expensive Plantronics headsets and not had the quality be as good as the one that I had to buy in an emergency at Radio Shack for $19.95,
Yeah.
and just return the other one.
Yeah.
No lie, I have a headset that cost $5 at Bimart or something, and I bought it as a backup somewhere when I was on vacation or something, and it works. It just works better than the $30 Logitech mic I have.
Now, are you going to sound like a Leo Laporte or something? No, you're not. But you don't have to. Most people listening to a podcast are doing it through computer speakers or earbuds from an iPod or something like that.
I do have
They're
to say
not-
that I would recommend, though, that people have a headset and not just use the microphone on the laptop,
Yes.
because the direct connection does make the quality a lot better
Right.
and minimize
Well, you
sort
get a lot of
the
room echo.
external
Yeah,
sounds and
exactly.
the echoing.
Right. But as far as the quality of your voice, it's not going to make that much of a difference. Not to the point where your audience is going to get turned off. So go cheap.
and-
There's no reason not to.
It shouldn't be a hurdle, basically.
Yeah,
is
it's
what's
not a
going on.
hurdle.
I think you see on here a lot of things just free.
Yeah.
Free.
Yeah.
Yeah, the editing software, and you don't have to be super computer savvy to do this either. I mean, like we mentioned before, we used to edit out every and you don't even need to do that. When I use Audacity with the lame codec, codec just lets you export to MP3.
Lame stands for something. It's not like this codec sucks. It's,
Yeah,
it's lame. No.
I don't remember what it stands for, but
I don't know what it stands for either.
But Audacity is totally free, and it's really easy for a complete noob to figure out how to use it.
It's like click and drag to select an area, and then you just press delete.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
It's
if you
easy.
choose to
Yeah.
get crazy, like into editing out like crazy things or throwing in effects, I have a friend that spent $60,000 on a sound arts degree, and she could use this very adeptly to do things that I wouldn't even think of doing. So if you were to get into it and really want to jazz it up with some sound effects or something, you could still do that with this free software. You don't have to have something crazy special to do that. Or if you don't know what you're doing at all, which I didn't when I first started using it, it's really super easy to use anyway.
Yeah, I mean,
So
I can
it's
use
very-
it, and as far as I do the editing, it's like I'm basically, we chat a little bit before the show.
Right,
And then
cut
it's like,
that
okay,
out.
now we're going to pause. And now we're going to start. And then I just get rid of the beginning.
Exactly.
And
Right.
whatever might be at the end. And
Right.
that's it. And it's just a matter of highlighting and deleting. And let me tell you, if I can do it, anyone can do it.
Now, if you've heard our show, what we do is at the beginning, I say bandwidth is provided by geekcast.fm, GE, and then we go into this episode is number whatever it is, we're talking about blah, 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 and then I say, and now this episode is brought to you by whoever the sponsor is for that show. Everything except for the episode number, basically, is already pre-recorded and stuck up in GarageBand. So all I do is I import the files that we just recorded from Skype, I stick them in GarageBand, I record the intro saying this is episode number whatever, and I'm done. You know, unless there's any edits that need to be made in the show itself, all of my intro pieces and my outro pieces are already there. You do it once and it's just a template.
Right, so the editing doesn't take much time,
No.
and everything's free. And then the uploading, it's just how fast you're able to do the file, and usually it takes maybe
Days.
10
For me, it
minutes
takes
for
days,
me
but
to upload a pretty big file, and that's it. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, and if you're worried about the time it's going to take to edit, obviously with all things, the time gets shorter.
Yeah.
But, I mean, we record on average like a 30 to 45 minute podcast. It really just takes me like 10 minutes because, like Lisa said, you know, we chat a little bit beforehand. I just write down, like, with Pamela and with Skype, it tells you what time you're at, like when you're talking. So I just write down what time it is so that when I go into Audacity, I can just go right to, 5 minutes and 50 seconds, cut out all the stuff before, pop in that intro, and be done. So it takes 5 to 10 minutes to export it, use CN Levelator, and that's about it.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
it's
for
really,
me, if it ever takes me days to get a show up from when it was recorded, it's because I've got kids. That's it. You know, I get stuck doing other things with the kids.
So we really
takes time.
covered a lot of this except for the operating systems, which is, it doesn't really matter. What we're saying is what you're on. And there's software
Amiga?
that's free for all of this.
An Amiga is a very old system.
all right,
See, he knows.
I'll take your word for it.
All right, so now let's talk about what you need on the website side.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, you've got to have a host and a domain. And why don't you guys talk about whether you need an existing site or whether you should get a site dedicated just to your podcast?
That's up to you.
Yeah, it's like Daniel does. They have their geekdadsweekly.com, but
Right.
also are hosted on geekcast.fm.
Right.
We have we just got our own domain, but we've been running for a year and a half, 2 years on just geekcast.fm. If you can find that kind of network or group of podcasters that already have the hosting and domain, you don't even necessarily need to set it up yourself. You can get going on that, and then later on down the line, like we've decided, we want to kind of do some other things. So later on down the line, you can decide, all right, I'll spend the $11.99 for a domain and whatever for hosting.
Right.
But if you can get on that kind of network, and Geekcast, is only one of there's
One of many.
one of many that will host your podcast for free. Some have limitations on how long it is, or
Some put
put advertisements on it. So
Yeah.
there's if you're willing to work with that, you don't even necessarily have to have your own domain and hosting, but it definitely makes things easier.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of what your intention with the podcast is in the first place.
Sure.
If you're trying to, get a revenue stream where you've got traffic coming into your own site and you've got, some kind of other revenue opportunities when you get traffic to your site, then you do want to embed it there, and you want to have people actually listen to the podcast and maybe interact with some other things on your own domain, whatever it might be.
Right.
If your intention is strictly just to get information and content out there and not have to worry about all the bandwidth and everything else with the hosting, then you can go with these other options as well. So it's really a personal decision that you need to make.
Right.
And if you're doing it on your own site, there's all these readily available free plugins that you can use to
Yeah.
make it really easy. There's
Especially if you're using
PowerPress,
WordPress.
PodPress.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've completely gone onto WordPress now with everything and use PowerPress as the plugin for any of these things. And it's real simple to use, and it'll get back to your question about getting in iTunes too. And the back end of PowerPress is a real simple feed thing that you can put in there, which will start the process of getting it into iTunes as well.
Yeah.
So we already talked a little bit about some of the podcast networks that exist, and now we should get into promoting it and how people can get the word out. I mean, it's great to do a podcast, but the idea is that, you want to have more than just your mom.
You want to have an
listen to
audience.
it.
Yeah.
So you want to get some people listening to it.
Mom doesn't
And
even listen.
since you guys are all marketers,
Your mom doesn't listen?
you want to promote it. So
Should know how
you
to
can
turn on
do
the
that
computer.
through
mine
podcasting
either.
networks. Geekcast.fm is great. One of the reasons I think that I like working with them is also that they're on Twitter. They tweet it out when a new one comes out.
Right.
I have a co-host. He's on Twitter. He tweets about it when it comes out. So we're sort of, always getting the word out that way. What about other social media?
Yeah, the Facebook actually is interesting because I have the fan page set up for the site, for the shows. And I have it integrated so that automatically the RSS feed will come into the Facebook fan page and it'll show up there. But what that doesn't do necessarily is give your Facebook audience a chance to actually click and play within Facebook. And it's, you probably all know the difference between the types of audiences and who you're going to find at different places. So one of the things I do end up doing manually is I will link the actual URL for the podcast in the Facebook fan page. So what that will do is it'll bring a little blue arrow there so that if somebody, instead of leaving Facebook to go to the website to listen to that podcast, they can actually click the button, listen to it within Facebook, and like it and share it and do all the things that you can do in Facebook there. So it is a good way to promote it. Is don't just let the feed do it, also go manually link that podcast URL.
Yep.
And what about the importance of iTunes? Do you think that, are most people subscribing to a podcast and having it automatically downloaded in iTunes and listening there?
I think iTunes is probably one of the more important things you can do for the popularity of your show, actually. There are people who discover shows simply by going into iTunes and clicking around and searching the podcast directory, and they'll find your show. They found ours.
So how do people get listed in that directory? If
They do it through the plugin that we talked about a minute ago. That when you set up that plugin in WordPress, and there's plugins for Drupal and all the other CMSs too, or you can do it manually. You can go through iTunes and set it up manually. All you need is an RSS feed. It all works off of RSS. So it's very simple, really, when it comes right down to it.
Do good cover art, though.
Definitely do good cover art, because
you can have a great show, but it will really, the cover art itself is going to attract people's attention within iTunes. When they're scrolling through there and they see something that jumps out at them visually, they'll stop and look at their description and everything else.
Because nobody is going to take the time to download an entire episode just to hear what you sound like before they see your art. They're going to see your icon before they download your show. And if your icon isn't popping at them, they're going to ignore you.
Yeah, and I don't know about PowerPress, but at least with PodPress, they put a default little Mighty Mouse icon in there.
Yeah.
So because I use it, know that when I'm looking through iTunes, if I see that icon, then I know they're using WordPress and they're using PodPress. And that's not like a bad thing, but it is just kind of funny if you see that a lot. So you definitely want to stand out, because somebody might not know what that means, might not be as savvy, and might skip right past you because they're like, Mighty Mouse, what the hell? And so yeah, having that little icon, it doesn't have to be anything fancy. You can find stock things online to use, or hire a designer if you want to get crazy with it, or just
go to Fiverr.com. $5.
Go to Fiverr. Oh my gosh, there's so many people doing
600
logos.
pixels by 600 pixels. Simple.
Now, what other methods are you guys using to promote your shows? We talked a little bit about having guests on shows and how then they'll turn around and promote
That's
things.
tremendous.
Yeah.
That's a big way to promote the show.
Because like we said, they're coming on the show because they want to expand their audience,
Right.
but they're also expanding your audience because they have their own audience. Like, I can't tell you how many, more listens we got when we had Jim Kukrow come on our podcast.
Same with us.
Exactly, because Jim's got this wide audience that, he says, hey, I'm on this podcast, and people go listen. Yep. So it helps you to have the guests, but But, you know, also another thing that we've been doing lately is posting on forums. There's a new forum around that we've been posting our show notes on with a link back to Geekcast. And that, you know, the forum isn't really public yet, but as soon as, you know, it does get announced and
it
is
will be
public,
soon.
yeah, it's coming out soon. You know, the episodes are already there. So I'm sure that will bring people in as well, because there are a lot of people with that forum mindset that are really, you know, into the message boards and forums that will then see your posts and, you know, take that click back to listen to the episode.
Yeah.
Tricia mentioned show notes, and I think that's something we probably ought to address too. And there's different approaches to show notes, and some of it might just be any time that you mention a link in the conversation, you want to make it easy on your audience to find what you referenced instead of trying to transcribe what you say.
Right.
Put it in the show notes so that they can get to whatever it might be. The other way is, and it's something that I do for the authors, is that I'll actually write up almost an article, like a blog post about the book that they, what they wrote and what the topic is about and everything else. And then to go with this promoting concept is that I'll just kind of reformat that post and submit it to e-zine articles, and then it gets picked up and distributed as if it's a written book review essentially. So it gets that out there, gets a link out there to the website, and actually it's just kind of another form of taking a podcast and using it as different type of content and getting it distributed out there as well.
Right, and that's also really important because it helps make it more searchable too, and
exactly.
rank higher in the search engines by having text associated with it. So
Absolutely.
if you write a little intro summarizing what you talked about, you don't have to do a full transcript. There are people that transcribe the entire thing. That's a very tedious process.
Very tedious.
Don't try to do it
There's
yourself.
no software that can do it accurately enough. You've got to do it by hand or hire somebody to do it by hand.
And it takes
a
3 times.
long time.
And I don't even think that it's that. It depends on
I don't
what
think
the
it's that
content
beneficial.
is. I don't think it's
Yeah.
that beneficial. I think just having a synopsis of what you're saying and then including the links is
Absolutely.
Is great.
If you can write up 3 or 4 paragraphs about what you've just talked about, good enough.
And so the last one here is to cross promotions on similar podcasts. So why don't we talk about how that works and how people can leverage that?
Why are you looking at me?
I don't know. Well, that goes back to what we were talking about with guests. It's basically you promote my show, I'll promote your show. You come on mine, I'll go on yours. It's for the comic book geeks out there. It's like when you have a crossover between 2 major characters, and you have a boost in sales of each comic book. And I'm looking at you guys
That
over
was for
here.
Mike,
That was for
yeah.
them. No, cross promotion can be very powerful depending on who you've got on your show and what they're willing to do for you. We're talking with somebody now who, if they come on the show, I haven't told you this yet, but should they come on the show, that'll put us in front of an audience of tens of thousands of people. And he knows what I'm talking about.
How can we get them on our show?
Well, we'll work on that. So yeah, cross promotion it can be a very big deal.
And the other thing is you might want to just, if you're talking about a particular topic and maybe that day for some reason you're talking about, I don't know, dogs, look for other podcasts that have something similar in nature, and then even talk to that person or send them an email and say like, hey, we did this thing on this, and they might say to their listeners, well, don't forget to listen over here, because it's not taking away from their audience, it's just giving them additional information and giving you additional exposure.
Right.
Right.
Exactly.
Another good thing to bring attention to yourself is contests. If you run contests and you have something good to give away, then you can go out on to Twitter and Facebook and forums and other podcasts and say, hey, we're giving away a pass to Affiliate Summit. Come listen and find out how to win, that kind of thing. And that will get people, as long as, a lot of times I find that if I am interested enough to download a podcast and listen to 1 or 2 episodes, I will, if I like it, I'll keep listening. And of course, not every episode is really going to resonate with you, but you'll still keep listening. So if you get people in to just 1 or 2 because you're giving away something really good, then if they like what they hear, aside from, hey, do this to win, they're going to keep listening. And then you've gained another listener. And then if the content is good enough, you also can't, underestimate word of mouth. It's just people saying, hey, I listened to this show. I don't know how many people I tell to listen, because I'm not a parent. I'm obviously not a geek dad. But I tell a lot of people like, hey, you would love this show. Go listen to this show. And I listen and I'm not a geek dad. You know, I listen to a podcast called The Parent Experiment. I don't have kids at all, but it's amusing to me, and it's interesting information.
Yeah.
And so
Being a parent's amusing. Yes, that's the word I'm looking for when I think about parenting.
Okay, it's Teresa Strasser and Lynette Carolla. It's funny.
Right.
But, you know, you tune in for one thing or another, and then...
Messy, I think, would be the better word, actually.
Probably.
Yeah. Anyway.
Point is, you tune in, damn it, and,
Yes.
and whatever might resonate with you resonates with you, and you keep listening.
Right.
And just to make one quick point before we move on about Twitter and using social media is you're not just twittering out to your followers. It's likely that those folks are going to retweet it, and then you're going to reach additional people that you never would have before, and maybe they're
Right.
going to tune in and get hooked. So it's really important that to use all of the social media.
Now, there's one more thing, too, is that one thing that you said that reminded me. You said that you might have listeners going forward. You could also have listeners going backwards.
Yeah.
Make your old shows accessible because, I mean, Drew will tell you, when he discovers a new podcast, he goes back and listens to all the previous shows.
Be a completist.
He's a completist, exactly. There might be 60 episodes. It's like, he'll listen to them. There are people like Drew out there.
I do
Make
that
your
sometimes.
old. Yeah, I know, right? Make your show accessible to people going backwards because you may say something that resonates with them on a prior show that they really get into. Yeah,
It's evergreen.
Yeah, I do that too, but...
And I was going to say the other thing is with that in mind, you should think about even if you're not sure how long you're going to continue, like you said that you have episode numbers, or you should you should think about having a convention right up front that will carry you through. You don't want to get 12 episodes in and then say, oh, we should start calling this episode 12, but episode 1 was just name something random. Like, try to establish consistency
Continuity,
from the beginning, whether you're naming it, you know, by number or by date or whatever, but do it right up front.
Yeah.
So I think that we only have about 15 minutes left, and so we're gonna let you guys ask some questions. And I believe there was supposed to be some kind of new-fangled, funky way of submitting questions.
Right.
I don't know.
You know what? It's a small
I don't
room.
see any of that,
Raise a
so
hand.
I think I'm gonna
Who has a
just
question?
have you yell out,
Yeah.
and I'll repeat it. Or try
So
to.
if you use PowerPress, do you need to register with iTunes or submit to iTunes as well?
You do, yeah.
Regularly, or?
Just one time, just the first time that you set it up. In PowerPress, actually, there's a nice form in there that you can fill out descriptions and, you know, keywords for your podcast and so on. But you'll submit to iTunes a URL of or what your RSS feed is, sorry. And then they're going to send you back just a confirmation saying, here's the URL for it. You plug it right in, and then from then on, every time that you produce a podcast, it actually ends up in the iTunes.
Tell me what that is.
What your RSS feed is.
Right. You plug that into iTunes. iTunes is going to give you a code to plug back into PowerPress. Whenever you produce a new episode, at the bottom of your new post page, it'll ask for a URL where that MP3 file is being stored. You give it that, and PowerPress will create the player for you in your blog post and tell iTunes about the location of that MP3 file.
PowerPress won't, like, it only uses one category on my blog. I did the
No, actually, you can do
Yeah, you
multiple.
can-
You can do multiple categories
PodPress.
in PowerPress.
Look different next time I went there.
Yeah.
I just had to uninstall it.
Yeah.
PowerPress won't do that.
No,
Yeah,
PowerPress
yeah.
is highly customizable. You can do
Yeah.
just about anything you want to do with it. Categories are very, very flexible with PowerPress.
We've got a question right up here.
Do you actually host your MP3 files on your server, or it's...
It varies.
I do. I think with Geekcast,
With Geek Dads Weekly, it's hosted on geekcast.fm.
Right, same with
Same with
affiliate
you
marketing
guys.
Fanatics.
But Baseballisms is not.
Yeah,
you guys
I
host that
host them.
yourself.
Are there sites besides Geekcast, like YouTube, that you can...
Well, with YouTube, you're limited to 10 minutes. So,
I understand, but I'm talking in terms of podcasting. Are there websites that you can
what's it?
Libsyn. Blueberry without
Yeah,
the,
Blueberry,
without the E.
Libsyn. Yeah,
Libsyn, yeah. So
Yeah.
there's other options there. Yeah.
absolutely.
Podbean, I think, is another one.
Podbean, yeah. I think that's
Yeah,
right.
some, like we were saying earlier, you know, some of them have time limits or they insert ads, so there's different concessions you're gonna have to make if you don't host it yourself, or find somewhere as gracious as Geekcast to host it for you.
Oh, cool. We got a mic. Excellent.
Ooh.
So anybody else have a question? Anybody else have a question?
Oh no, a question from you.
A question for me, yeah. What are some examples of different types of podcasts that you three listen to for different reasons? You've mentioned, some are just funny, some are educational. What are some examples that maybe we should be listening to?
I don't listen to podcasts.
Go ahead.
I listen to almost anything on Leo Laporte's Twit network, and it's like This Week in Tech that Daniel mentioned, This Week in Google. There's a lot of great different sub-niches of the tech industry that he covers on that network. So I listen to tons of those. If you're an Adam Curry fan, or if you know who Adam Curry is, he's got some great shows that are out there that are all different types of topics. I listen to baseball shows, of course, that type of thing. So if you have an interest, you're probably going to be able to find something that's related in the podcast world for it.
I listen to She Shops Around on Geekcast.
That was a setup.
That was a setup, wasn't it? No, I listen to the same things that he does. Leo Laporte's Twitch shows, pretty much.
I aside from the shows on Geekcast.fm, I don't listen to anything productive. I listen to a lot of Smodcast with Kevin Smith.
Oh yeah, Smodcast too. Yeah.
And the Pretty Good Podcast, which and
Sarcastic Voyage. Have you checked out
No.
Sarcastic Voyage yet? No.
God, what else do I listen to? Like I said, nothing productive. The Adam Carolla show, nothing productive. I'm probably one of the few people that does listen to podcasts while I'm sitting at my computer, so it's just kind of there, while I'm working. But yeah, I tried This Week in Tech, and it was too techy for me.
I listen to all the This Week in Tech stuff
It's called
too,
This Week in Tech. What did you expect?
I don't know.
Do we have any other questions here? Anybody?
Would you recommend that I take my videos from YouTube, strip the audio out, and make them podcasts?
Yes.
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring that up. And actually,
And then teach me how to
going
do
the other
that.
direction is an interesting way to get some content out there too, where it's actually, if you're recording just an audio podcast, I'm hearing a lot of good results from people that have actually taken that audio and sliced it down to the best parts, and then add some visual content to it and putting it up on YouTube, and that's another way of getting people to find that content. Yep. I think it can work in both directions.
Throw it into PowerPoint and do a little slideshow along with the audio that you've just recorded.
Okay.
Sure, you can put it on YouTube. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Should I do audio or video podcast? Can't you do both?
Yeah, sure.
Mm-hmm. Skype will record video as well as it will audio.
Absolutely.
Destroys.
Okay.
Well, Daniel Destroys is kind of like that.
It's a video.
It's a video. It's not really, I have a hard time defining podcast sometimes. Just because it's a video online doesn't mean it's a podcast. To me, there needs to be some kind of scheduling or continuity or something like that. But yeah, my Daniel Destroys project
Well,
is
but it's a regular show.
It's trying to be a regular show.
Theoretically, it's
Theoretically.
a regular show.
I would say that I would not recommend doing a video podcast unless you have something that needs to be illustrated or is worthy of it. I mean, I don't think it's compelling just to watch two people talk. It's actually, I think, more compelling to sort of imagine them talking and hear them, kind of like how I'd love to listen to baseball on the radio. But I wouldn't do it unless you were trying to illustrate something or make a real point that needed visuals.
So submit to iTunes, and there's a million other places to submit the podcast.
I wouldn't say a million, but there's more than a few.
I think there's at least 3,524, but
Somewhere in there.
Could be.
what do you think?
Could be. Well, I mean, I can name a couple off the top of my head, but
I would really say as long as you have it on iTunes, that's really There's the iTunes and iPods and iPads and iPhones are so infiltrated in society. I personally don't know anybody that doesn't have an iPod or an iPhone. So
or some kind of MP3 player, portable. One person in the back doesn't have one. Okay.
All right. Well, but they're using iTunes, is my point.
No. All
right, but I don't think it's limited to that. I know people who don't have any iPod or iPad or iPhone that are still using iTunes to manage things on their desktop or laptop.
Oh yeah, I don't know anybody using iTunes that doesn't have
yeah.
an iPad or an iPhone.
Another main place to go submit to that we should submit at?
If you go to and use PowerPress, it's put out by a company called Blueberry,
Right.
and it's so it's kind of integrated right to there, and so that's another way of finding podcasts online that way.
Yeah.
So
There was one called Juice. Have you heard of Juice? I'm not sure. It's a kind of
Joost?
no.
No.
Well, that's a video.
Yeah.
Mm.
I haven't played with that in a long time, so don't forget I said that.
What do you think the perfect length of time is for a podcast, or short, long? At what point do you think you quit losing people?
Yeah, I know, right? As long as it's comfortable for you. If you're comfortable with 10 minutes, do 10 minutes. If you're comfortable with an hour and a half, do an hour and a half.
And I think it's also, as long as your content will provide.
Yeah.
If you have 15 minutes of content, don't try to draw it out into an hour. You don't need to. Yeah, I mean, it just depends. I think what the feedback I've heard from a lot of people is that like 30 minutes is really nice because that's a nice little nugget they can easily do while they're jogging or while they're, on their way in the car somewhere, and they don't have to stop it and pick it up again later.
Right.
So I've heard from a lot of people that 30 minutes is a nice little nugget to do. But I mean, I've heard shorter ones and I've heard longer ones, and it just depends on how much content you have. Like the ones I listen to that are just because they're funny, they go on for an hour and a half sometimes. I listened to one that was 3 hours, and they were just rambling, but it was hilarious because they were ripping on each other, and it was just funny. So, if you can ramble on for 3 hours and you think your listeners will take that journey with you, then knock yourself out.
More power to you.
But I would say, like, for a business-type podcast, I like the ones that are 30 minutes. Or
as a consumer,
30, 45, something like that.
as a podcast consumer, if it's too short for me, I find that I don't want to listen to it because I'm usually doing it with a portability thing, or I'm in the car or I'm on the trail walking or something like that. And if it's too short, then I'm like, okay, now what am I going to listen to? So I agree with Tricia. Half an hour seems to be kind of that sweet spot. Yeah.
Drew, did you have a question? Yeah.
I'm thinking of doing.
Who are you?
Drew Bennett.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of doing a podcast.
You're already doing a podcast.
I'm thinking of doing another one.
Okay.
Doing with screen capture. Would you recommend any different screen capture programs?
Camtasia, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. We have a question in the back too. What's that one on the Mac though? ScreenFlow. I know Scott Jangro uses ScreenFlow for a lot of things. Yeah.
Are you monetizing your podcasts?
We didn't talk about that at all, did we?
That's why I'm here.
Yeah, we are a little bit. There are two main ways I can think of to monetize. One is to get direct advertising and say, hey, give us money and we'll talk about you. And the other way is to say we'll do affiliate deals and say, we'll say this episode's brought to you by Things from Another World. Go to tfaw.com/geekdads, and that'll bounce through ShareSale and then back to TFAW, and we'll do an affiliate deal that way. So, it's
We also have affiliate links in our show notes sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So if we talk about something that we happen to be affiliates for, and it's not, we're not trying to plug anything necessarily, but if it comes up in, if we talk about Elance and it comes up in conversation, and we're Elance affiliates, we'll throw an affiliate link in there.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Also, when you use geekcast.fm, they allow you to create sponsorships and keep 100% of the revenue for yourself. So if you go through Geekcast and you decide that you want to have a sponsor, you don't even have to share in that revenue with them. They'll let you keep it.
They're awesome that way.
Anybody else with a question? Don't be shy.
Was there a question in the very back earlier?
Sorry.
We'll just give you our cards afterward.
What do you think about the future of podcasting? I mean, it sounds like podcasting is basically YouTube offline with only audio, basically. So when YouTube decides that you can take their videos offline, is that going to change the game, do you think?
I think it would just make it better.
Interesting thought. I don't know. Podcasting has been around a long time, and it's never really gotten the recognition that, say, video got when it really started getting big. I don't think it's going anywhere. I mean, I think it's going to remain
I think
largely.
my biggest fear for the future of podcasting is Skype, actually. You know, I mean, seriously, every podcast that you look at has got some involvement with Skype through the recording process, and that's how you connect with people to make that happen. So to me, it's like, okay, if something happens to Skype, or Skype decides that they're going to monetize by inserting something into their feeds or whatever it might be, what happens to podcasting then? You know,
Sure,
so
that might
I think
change
that's.
What's a good number of views a podcast could have? I mean, a good YouTube video, you get millions. I mean, can you expect that type of thing with the podcast? No.
I mean, it's a different audience.
If you think about what's a million view video on YouTube, it's something really wacky, something
guy kicking
goofy.
himself in the head.
It's some guy doing something stupid. I mean,
And with a bikini on it, somebody with a bikini on it.
Yeah,
then gets all
exactly.
that.
Yeah, I mean, podcasts typically don't run that way. It's all audio. It's all, you know, it's in your head. You have to use your imagination. It's not as visually stimulating as a video on YouTube.
Yeah,
The
it's a different beast. It's a different audience. There's a different kind of person that will go, like my brother is all the time telling me, oh, go look this up on YouTube. And I'm like, I don't freaking have time to do that. Like, I don't have time to like sit there and watch this stupid video of like a cat going, boop. But I have the time to listen to a podcast while I'm doing other things. I'm very multitask oriented. So I just think it's a different type of person that is, you know, ripe to go to YouTube to look for something, and somebody who's ripe to go to iTunes to listen to something.
It's also not sustainable. I mean, on YouTube, a lot of these videos sort of like it's a one-hit wonder. It catches on. People watch it for 3 days.
That's right.
They forward it to other people. It's not like those people are creating sustainable content that you're going to come back and say, oh, I'm going to watch them all the time.
It's our time.
So I guess we're out of time. So
We're out of
we're gonna.
time.
If you have any additional questions, everybody's address is up there, or you can come and
Absolutely. Come
grab
up and talk to
people.
us, please.
Thank you very much for all your questions, and thanks for coming.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
Thank you.